For about the last 2 years, the welterweight division of the UFC has been one of the least interesting divisions in the promotion in the entire sport. You know, Kamaru Usman, he's a great champion. He was pretty much cutting down all of his contenders. And it really just didn't seem like anything really interesting was happening in that division. Over the past few weeks, that has definitely changed. We have seen some seismic shifts within the welterweight division of the UFC. And some of them are more interesting than others, and some of them are interesting in different ways. So over the past few weeks in particular, there are some questions that haven't been answered. We don't really know what's next for Kamaru Usman. And we don't really know what's next for his number one contender, Colby Covington. I mean, Colby Covington has had 2 shots at the championship. He lost them both. But nothing has happened in that division to really supplant his place as the number one contender. Now, we do have a brand new number 2 contender. And that happened when Khamzat Chimaev, I'm sure that I just horrifically mispronounced that. Khamzat Chimaev knocked off Gilbert Burns in what was absolutely a banger. Just an absolute barn burner of a fight. And that was a fight that could have gone either way, but at the end, Khamzat Chimaev claimed the decision the decision victory in that fight. There's a new number 2 contender in the world. But that's not the only shift that has happened in the UFC welterweight division over the past month. And one of the very interesting ones in a different way happened just this past weekend. So Belal Muhammad managed to get a decision victory over Vincente Luque. And that result was very telling, in a very unfortunate way. In a way that I think that a lot of people haven't really stopped to consider. And it's not so much that Belal Muhammad is now going to find himself within the top 5 of the UFC welterweight division. What it really raises questions about is, what is it that's missing in Vincente Luque's chest? Because this fight was a tremendous opportunity for him, and for this particular reason. Now, a few weeks ago, I talked about the way that Kamaru Usman and Israel Adesanya, they were both setting their sights on the light heavyweight championship, reportedly, because they didn't want to fight each other. These are 2 fighters that were trying to avoid each other because they were such good friends. And for other reasons, they didn't want to have fewer champions from Africa, so neither one of them wanted to take the other's championship. And there was a similar situation that has been going on with Gilbert Burns and Vincente Luque. Because they train together and because they're such good friends, there's an agreement between the 2 fighters. These aren't 2 guys who want to fight each other. They want to go out and fight other guys. And for Vincente Luque, here's kind of what the problem with that was. If you're Gilbert Burns, that's no problem. You're already the number 2 contender in the world. You don't actually need to fight Vincente Luque to get where you need to go. You need to be fighting Colby Covington and Kamaru Usman to get where you want to be. But you didn't need to fight Vincente Luque. But if you're Vincente Luque, you're not the number 2 contender in the world. You have to fight the guys that are above you to get where you want to be. And if you're already ruling one of those contenders off limits, if you're already saying that you're not going to fight the number 2 contender in the world, you have just placed an artificial roadblock between you and where you want to be. And if you don't want to be the champion, just get out of the sport. So in an odd sort of way, when Khamzat Chimaev beat Gilbert Burns, he did a huge favor to Vincente Luque. He provided him with another guy that Luque could fight to get himself to where he wants to be that isn't Gilbert Burns. And in order to be able to make the case that he should be the next guy to fight that guy, He had to beat Belal Muhammad. And Belal Muhammad, as fate would have it, he went into this main event this last weekend as a fighter that Vincente Luque had already beaten. So right then and there, this is not an especially daunting prospect. You beat the guy that you've already beaten once, you move on, you stamp your ticket to fight for the Welterweight Championship of the world. But as we saw this last weekend, he couldn't get it done. And to me, this kind of suggests that maybe Vincente Luque's heart just is not where it needs to be, to ever become a champion in this sport. And maybe we didn't even need to see that he couldn't beat Belal Muhammad a second time around. Maybe we didn't even need to see that on a second opportunity, he couldn't beat the guy that he beat the first time, couldn't beat him again. Maybe we didn't even need to see that. Maybe the only evidence that we ever really needed was that he was saying that he was for himself. He had made the decision that the number 2 contender, the number 2 welterweight contender in the world, was off limits to him. He didn't want to fight him because they're good buddies. I mean, MMA is a different sort of sport, but there are basic realities of it. And that is that at a certain point, friendship has to be less important than the competition. Vincente Luque just could not bring himself to make that decision. And of course, all of that is one thing, and that was definitely, in hindsight, that was the first sign that we all should have recognized. But even after that, when suddenly the golden opportunity is presented to himself, and he doesn't even have to go out and beat his friend, he just has to beat the guy that he already beat. And somehow he didn't have it in his heart to go out and take full advantage of that. Really does suggest to me that there is something missing in the core of Vincente Luque's being that is going to prevent him from being a serious championship contender, let alone ever being a champion.